IA's dedication in ensuring that tangible treasures that immortalize our history are now accessible to the public is commendable.
Congratulations to the Intramuros administration. I wasn't expecting that the collection can be so amazing. It was really an awesome experience seeing all of this collection, and it's like 30% only of the collection. I wish to see more. Again, congratulations.
Masasabi ko ito ay malaking isang tagumpay kasi matagal namin nakatago at hindi na i-display talaga sa public yan. Pangalawa, nagpalipat-lipat na ng location yan at ngayon, na-save natin.
Intramuros mahalaga para sa akin bilang Pilipino kasi maraming bagay sa Pilipinas dito nagsimula sa Intramuros. Well, actually, more than reviving the structures, ang gusto ko talaga maintindihan ng tao kung anong kontribusyon ng Intramuros sa pagmuno ng Pilipinas. Kasi kung walang pagkilala, walang pagmahal, hindi siya mananatili. Fernando Sialcita ako, Professor Emeritus sa Ateneo de Manila sa Department of Sociology and Anthropology. Ang mensahe ko lang, dapat mas nuanced, mas complex ang ating pagtingin sa kasaysayan. Kasi mahirap itong black and white pagtingin sa kasaysayan. Masyadong moralistic, basta Kastila masama. Dapat mas three-dimensional pagtingin sa kasaysayan.
For me, Intramuros would be actually the soul of a Manileño, maybe even the soul of the Philippines, because this is really where Manila and how the entire country was known. There is that special place in history for Intramuros. And so I believe it is our soul. I think Intramuros is important because if you do not know where history started, if you do not know where memories came from, then you will be lost. And so I urge everyone to even read a few chapters of books written on Intramuros so they will just know how life then was and how it evolved to life now. We have here close to 400, if not 500-year-old history, and so there's nothing like going back in time, and so reminisce for me is the word that would describe how I would feel. I'm Roberto P. Laurel, President of the Lyceum of the Philippines University, Manila, Cavite, and Makati campuses. The original LPU was located here in Intramuros in 1952 by my grandfather, Jose P. Laurel. Lyceum, LPU, has been here for the past 67 years, and I believe it has contributed to nation building. We have a number of alumni who we are very proud of, who have accomplished great accomplishments, achievements in their private and public lives. I wish Intramuros would develop more, that we have more locators coming in. I know there are a lot of challenges, but I want to commend the Intramuros administration, headed by the current administrator, Attorney Asido, for such a focused development effort. It will take time, but progress is there and we can see it moving. And so my hope is that this will continue and that we will become a thriving community, not just alive during the day when we have so many people coming in, but even at night.
Sa akin, special yung Intramuros dahil sa punong-puno ng historical yung Intramuros. Napamahal na rin po ako dito sa Intramuros dahil dito po ako nagtatrabaho. Ako po si Christian Roa. Ako ay isang security guard ng Intramuros bilang isang katipunero po. Naitutulong ko po dito sa Intramuros na mapanatili po yung mga kalinisan, kaayusan, at matiwasay na pagpapatupad. Ni-expect ko po dito sa Intramuros dahil po sa lalong tumatagal, gumaganda siya at dumarami yung mga turista na bumibisita dito.
Very unique, one of its kind. It's a historical zone actually, no? You have lots of museum in and out of the walls, no? Jaime, Jimmy Lim. I've started doing business here in 1988. I opened a small retail shop catering to Mapua students just in front of OWA, Overseas Worker Welfare Administration. And my main customer is Mapua. So now we thought of putting up this training center institute right in the heart of Intramuros. No? What better place, because it is a university hub. As you can see, we have 5 universities here and 1 middle school. We need more of this current administrator to see a better Intramuros. I'm very happy right now with the current administrator. Then what I hope for is a cleaner Intramuros. I hope all the stakeholders inside Intramuros will come together. We cannot all be leaders. Let's just follow the leader who is giving us the right direction.
As I always say before, whenever we say Manila, Manila was of course Intramuros, and during the Spanish period, and it was their prime city, and so everything that was about Philippine history and culture during the Spanish and of course the American period began and eventually developed in the walled city. And in the course of time, this would become also a prime urban tourism area, especially with the restoration and the heritage conservation that has been going on in the city. I think the biggest challenge for Intramuros is for it to be incorporated into that modernization without affecting the historical heritage of the walled city. I mean, accommodations can be done, for the modernization that is happening. Internet, telephones, modern facilities for tourists. But it doesn't have to come at the sacrifice of what existed there before. I think that's one of the biggest challenge until today, for developing Intramuros. I'm Dr. Jose Victor Torres. I'm a associate professor here at the History Department of the De La Salle University. I teach Rizal and Philippine history here in the history department. Well, I think it's because it's one of the closest place. If you're a foreign visitor, it's one of the closest place and one of the most visited based on tourism information. It's one of the most visited places in Manila. Because you have to remember, Manila is the capital city. And a capital city has to have its attraction, both old and new. And for so many years, that old attraction, I don't mean old because it's passé, it's old because it's part of our past. And the realization that there was something that remained behind for the people to know and experience and see with their own eyes is probably something that's an experience, a good experience for visitors, both foreign and local. I'd probably siguro describe Intramuros as rich. It's rich in heritage. It's rich in the Filipino identity, and it's very rich in our history and culture. And I think that would fit the description not only before but today. And as I always said, whenever you walk through the streets of Intramuros, you are walking through Philippine history.
Well, Intramuros for me is many things because my father used to work in the port area, in Bonifacio Drive in port area. So even as a small boy, I really knew Intramuros already back in the 50s. And I was very happy to have been appointed administrator in 1989. And that really involved me more with the history of Intramuros and the plans for its further development. It would be very important that we know where we came from, and I think that's the special value of Intramuros. But even in modern times, there could be or there should be, and as it's happening now, other developments here in Intramuros. I'm Jose Capistrano Jr., formerly administrator of Intramuros. Well, as what's happening now, Escuela Taller assists in the restoration of heritage structures through our training of out-of-school youth in the various arts and crafts of heritage restoration. And I think this is important to preserve our historical and heritage structures, and at the same time also reach out to other parts of the country for the same purpose.
It was a very exciting time. That's what I remember most. I was on a holiday and I got a frantic call. Where are you anyway? They have been looking for you. And I said, what about? Having a restoration force as big as Intramuros was at the time, well, didn't exist anywhere in the country. when we came into Intramuros to work, what are we restoring? We do not know. How did it look, except for the ruined walls? That's why we have to dig pictures and pictures and pictures just to be able to provide a background and tell people this is important, this part of the walls look like this. Everything was something that came to us by a calling, you'd say, that we have to do it right. Intramuros is a beautiful memory of the past. It is like a microcosm of all things good and bad. There are many good stories about Filipinos, people who headed the construction of the walls, and they were Indios. The carvers were Filipinos also. People should follow the regulations more, and that they should not seek exemption all the time. And this applies to both government, church, and private owners. Ana Esperanza Bunag Gatunton. I was hired, I would say, I was one of the first employed in the Intramuros administration structure, and that was pretty 1979. You have many people saying that Intramuros should not be preserved because it is a colonial memory and that should be erased. I don't think so. It represents failure. It represents achievement. So it's about time that our people should see Intramuros is not just a symbol of colonialization, but a symbol of our spirit to rise above that.
As an Augustinian, it's special for me because in the history, after the Augustinian set foot in Cebu, so they came here in Intramuros and they established the convent and the house here in Intramuros. So it's special for me as an NCC official because this is an example, a model for other places here in the Philippines on how we will be able to preserve the heritage that was passed on to us from the past. They always have a saying that hindi ka makakarating sa pupuntahan mo kung hindi ka babalikan yung nakaraan. Well, past is very important to us because from the past we learn many things, including the pitfalls, a lot of challenges. So that's why it's important for us to know the past so that we will know where we're going to and we can reach our goal with confidence in the future. I wish that Intramuros will be a place where people will be educated on the heritage of the past. And also, well, I wish Intramuros would be will be clean or cleaner, and not much obstruction in terms of the appreciation for tourists, for tourism purposes. And it will be better like just many other heritage structures that we have abroad. Well taken care of and maintained, and it serves really its purpose. I am Father Harold Renteria, OSA,
I'm the head of the Subcommission for Cultural Heritage of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. NCCA is the ex facto Ministry of Culture of the country now, and its mandate is to come up with policies for the preservation, protection, and conservation of the cultural heritage of the country, and to manage the NEFCA, which is a grant-giving agency also. Well, as somebody in NCCA, especially as the head of the Subcommission for Cultural Heritage, my role is to make sure that we safeguard not only the structures, but the intangible heritage here in Intramuros, the history, the memories of the people here. And of course, since Intramuros serves as the buffer zone for the San Agustin Church, it's a World Heritage Site. And NCCA is the manager of the World Heritage Site. So our role is to make sure that San Agustin Church and the other churches which were inscribed also, part of the inscription, are safeguarded, are protected.
For me, Intramuros is a place of history. It is a cultural and creative hub, and it brings so much pride and joy to the 5th District as well. If I could describe Intramuros in one word, it's mesmerizing because walking along or walking around, it gives you a sense of history and makes you step into a whole new world that is so different from what you see outside the walls of Intramuros. My fondest memories of Intramuros, I would say, was when I was a little girl, because I also grew up here in the 5th District, and as a little girl, I would come to Intramuros with my parents. I would tag along. I would ride the Calesa. I would go around Intramuros, Fort Santiago, and I would remember also coming to Barbaras to eat with my dad. Hi, my name is Crystal Bagatsing. I am currently the Congresswoman of the 5th District of Manila, where Intramuros is located. One of my advocacies is about culture, preserving culture, and one of the things that I also do as a Congresswoman is make legislation, and I also have a constituency inside Intramuros. I think it's very important because when you say Metro Manila, there's really no place to go to for a cultural experience or for a historical experience. And there's really no other place like Intramuros. It's an original. There's nothing like it. If you want to have a feel of how it was to live during the Spanish times, this is where you go. I wish that everybody would work together to keep Intramuros the way it is, but make it better, preserve it better.
As a child, I would frequent Intramuros because of our educational field trip. We would usually go to the Manila Cathedral. So it's part of my childhood memory. Little did I know that after many years, I would be a resident of Intramuros. Cathedral started as a small parish church here in the same spot in 1571. When we talk of Manila, especially during the Spanish times, it was Intramuros. And the Manila Cathedral is in the heart of Manila, which is Intramuros, being the first cathedral in the Philippines, the center of Philippine governance. This was also the center of Philippine faith. Religion, especially Christianity, is not just about doctrines. Religion is about relationship. Young people are so engrossed in an activity, especially when they see that what they are doing is something that benefits others. And I think the church provides them with many opportunities for that. I wish that Intramuros to be a place where tourists are enriched when it comes to their discovery of their faith. I am Father Reginald R. Malikdem. I am the rector of the Manila Cathedral since July of 2015. Little did I know that after many years, I would be asked to take care of Mother Church of the Philippines of Intramuros.
So naging special sa akin yung Intramuros dahil dito rin ako nakatira, so dito na rin ako kumukuha para sa hanap buhay namin. And then ang Intramuros din para sa akin is parang isang tahanan na rin para sa akin. So ang role ko dito sa Intramuros ay parang tayo naging nag-a-attract or nagpapa-attract sa mga turista dito sa loob ng Intramuros para kahit pa paano makita rin nila yung kagandahan ng Intramuros. Ako nga pala si Valentino Mejia, isang e-trike driver dito sa Intramuros. So ang nakikita ko sa future ng Intramuros is lalawak pa yung ating turismo dito sa loob ng Intramuros, and then talagang makikilala ang Intramuros sa buong Pilipinas, hindi lang sa buong Pilipinas, sa buong mundo.
Yes, good afternoon everyone. So, wait lang Jeff. Right, so good afternoon. Okay ba Jeff? Rinig ba yung electric fan ko? Hindi naman, di ba? Anyway, hi everyone. It's nice to see all of you again in this episode of the Intramuros Learning Session. So we will start now. It's already 3 o'clock.
Recording in progress.
So welcome to the 66th episode of the Intramuros Learning Sessions. This episode is brought to you by the Intramuros Administration, and again, this is your host, Rancho Arcilia. And for today, we are going to have a very interesting topic on Intramuros in works of fiction, how the walled city is depicted in the literary landscape. But before that, a few reminders first. So, for those who are viewing via Zoom, feel free to raise your questions in the Q&A button below the screen. If you have any comments, there is a chat button below. If you are viewing via Facebook, feel free to comment in the comment section. And take note that only those who have successfully registered and viewed in Zoom will be eligible to get a certificate. And a feedback form will be emailed to you after the session. The certificate will be sent within a week, of course. And then lastly, note that this webinar is recorded and the recording shall be made permanently available in the Intramuros Administration's social media channels. So for today's episode, we have as speaker Jeffrey Yap, who is the current Supervising Historic Sites Development Officer of the Intramuros Administration. He has a BA in Philosophy from the San Beda University, as well as an MA in English Studies, major in Creative Writing from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. He has published essays, short stories, and papers with life in Manila as a central theme. He has taught Philippine literature in English at the Colegio de San Juan de Letran and more recently at the Assumption College, San Lorenzo, where he gives an online lecture on media and literary arts. Now, without further ado, I'd like to call on our speaker, Mr. Jeffrey Yap. Jeffrey, ready when you are.
Hey, thank you, Rancho, for the introduction. I would also like to thank the attendees from various schools, the teachers, as well as the tour guides, and the general public. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so my topic is the literary landscape of Intramuros. We often read books on history about Intramuros, articles about the walled city, but we seldom read a literary piece about Manila. So the topic will be, my lecture will be helpful for us to understand how literature evokes or reflects the city of Manila from Spanish period up to present day period. So my objective is to for us to identify the physical and sociocultural landscape that define Intramuros. So when I say physical and sociocultural, it could be the environment. Sociocultural is the culture, the people, the way of life of those who live or visited Intramuros. And it will be through the following. It will be defined through novels that we're going to discuss, short stories, essays, plays. So we won't limit ourselves to mere fiction, but also nonfiction. I'm also going to discuss or talk about a little bit about some of the historical accounts because some of the materials are very interesting. They're actually more interesting than the fiction. And some of the stories were actually derived mostly from the accounts, like the Blair and Robertson, which I'm going to discuss later. Also, we're also going to discuss screenplay, films, and other forms of literature. We have the letters and accounts from documents way back the Spanish period. Okay, so the Spanish period will start from the 16th century up to about the 19th century. So it's about 300 years of literature. While there are a lot of accounts about Intramuros from various sources, the literature was not that many. So what I did was I explored Blair and Robertson. So Emma Helen Blair and James Alexander Robertson did a very extensive research on Intramuros, or in Manila and the Philippines in general. So it's about 50 volumes, a lot of them hard copies. And we're actually very fortunate now because it's online, it's free. I also provided the website where we can view the text of the volumes. So the exploration of the Philippine Islands is very comprehensive in this volume. So if you take a look at the books, there's the volumes are so many. Let me share you some of the excerpts that I gathered from this. Okay. So the report of the encomiendas in the islands in 1591, just 20 years after the conquest of Luzon, reveals a wonderful progress in the work of civilization. In the city of Manila, there was a cathedral and a bishop's palace, monasteries for the Augustinian, Dominican, Franciscan friars, and a house for the Jesuits. The king maintained a hospital for Spaniards. There was also a hospital for Indians managed by 2 Franciscan lay brothers. The garrison was composed of 200 soldiers. The Chinese quarter of Parian contained some 200 shops and a population of about 2,000. So from this text alone, somehow we get a feel of the place already. We are grounded. We feel that we are already part of the place. We get to have an idea, the aura of the place. In provision for the sick and helpless, Manila at the opening of the 17th century was far in advance in any of the city and English colonies for more than a century and a half to come. So we can ask a question here. There are various ways of interpreting or looking at Manila at that time. So it wasn't just all in awe or a positive view or perspective of Intramuros. If we do a close reading here, it was mentioned that it was far in advance of any city. So it's a bit positive, but if you read the succeeding paragraph, the substantial buildings, the gaily dressed people, the abundance of provisions, and other necessaries of human life made Manila, as Morgan says, one of the towns praised by the strangers who flocked to it anywhere in the world. Antonio de Morga is one of the chroniclers and historians. So it's a positive view of the walled city. So we have an idea, a good idea of what the walled city is. We also have an Italian traveler providing his perspective of Intramuros. So let me read it to you. The Italian traveler Gemelli visited Manila in 1696 and characterizes the governor's residential as a dreadful trial, the strain of which would sometimes break their hearts. And Zuniga says that the commerce made a few rich in a short time with little labor, but there were very few. That were hardly 5 Spaniards in Manila worth 100,000, I would say, dollars, nor 100 worth 40,000. The rest either live on the king's pay or in poverty. Every morning one could see in the streets of Manila in the greatest poverty and asking alms, the sons of men who had made a fine show and left much money which their sons had squandered because they had not been well trained in youth. So we see a different view here of Manila. So it wasn't just all good or the beauty of Manila that is depicted here. We get to see the people living in Manila. Sometimes it's actually we get to know and discover about a place or a city through the people who lives in it. Okay. Another noteworthy book that I would like to share is the Manila Synod of 1582. So it's actually a okay. The Synod of Manila is meant to address the abuses made by the Spanish officials and soldiers to Filipinos. So it's more like a report. But if you read the text, you get to have an idea of the inequality at the time, the people living in Intramuros, and the officials who are unfortunately taking advantage or maltreating them. So we're going to read a bit, an excerpt from chapter 2 concerning the governors and obligation of such in general. Although it is true that the causes of the evils and destruction to this land are all manner of persons mentioned above, nevertheless the root of all them all is a governor who is the head of this commonwealth. And the reason why all of them are imputed to him is because he does not punish the grave and notorious offenses the Spaniards commit against the Indians. Since they are not punished, they feel that they have license to commit them. The Synod is organized by the clergy, and it created somehow a tension between the church and the state. If you are familiar with the painting of Felix Resurrection Hidalgo, the assassination of Governor General Fernando Manuel Bustillo Bustamante, it showed us the tension caused by this synod, among other things. To explain the painting and what happened, Bustamante was the Governor General in the 18th century of August at the time. And because he was doing an intensive inspection, he found out that there were losses in the treasury. So what he did was he imprisoned a number of the clergy involved in the anomaly. And even the Archbishop was arrested. So in retaliation, so if you look at the painting, the friars, led by the Franciscan, marched to the palace and led a fanatic mob in assassinating the governor. So this text, also from Blair and Robertson, gives us a very detailed narrative of what happened, and it's very literary. If you take a look at it, of the descriptions of the translation. So I'm just gonna read some parts of it. Okay, we start from the first paragraph. Without opposition, this multitude arrived at the doors of the palace. The Jesuits following at a short distance, with many of the common people and many boys, the entire crowd, with deafening yells, repeating the vivas of the religious. As for the soldiers of the guard, retreated in fear, and others laid down their arms. The mob climbed up by ladders and entered the first hall. The halberdiers not firing the swivel guns that had been provided, although the governor commanded them to do so. He now went forward to meet them with a gun, its bayonet fixed, and gave confused orders to his retainers to seize the weapons by which his order had been taken from them. One of the religious presented himself to the governor and tried to set forth to him the misfortunes into which he was rushing headlong. But at the first words that he uttered, the governor, already fierce, said to him, "Go away, father." So there, you feel the tension here with the words, the word choice in the translation. Even if it's an English translation, you already have an idea of what was happening. It evokes, it stimulates your imagination. You feel that you're in the place or in the situation. Another very interesting story in Blair and Robertson is the death of Doña Catalina Zambrano. So in this translation or summary made by Father Rene Avellana, the narration, it goes like this. So it was, sorry, it's not 1961. It's actually 17th century. Juan de Mesa, clerk and member of the Society of Jesus, and Doña Catalina fell in love. However, Doña Catalina was the wife of Governor General Alonso Fajardo. Rumors of Doña Catalina's liaison reached the governor, who caught the two as they were planning to sail out the city with the help of the ship's pilot. The governor stabbed the pilot, but the lovers escaped. Doña Catalina to an attic and Juan de Mesa down the street. The governor shot him while he pursued his wife and stabbed her. She has to confess before she died, so the governor called the priest. The lovers' corpses were laid out in the street until the hooded members of a Cofradia de Misericordia laid them to rest. Doña Catalina's buried in the Recollect Church. Don Juan's properties were sold and his house was torn down. So this is actually a rumor that became something that was actually true, and then it was translated because it became a crime report. And for the information of everyone, the house that was torn down was located at the corner, which is not the location of Plaza Santa Isabel. The Memorare Manila was actually the house of Don Juan de Mesa. So you get to see very interesting stories from the Spanish period alone. There were also some stories and actually more of a travelogue done by or written by Dutch Wiselius, translated to English, and was published by Ateneo Press. So here it goes. It's a different perspective of Intramuros during the 19th century. When Manila was built, they ignored all the advantages that the hilly location offered, combined with a natural beauty and a pleasing environment. And the city was built instead on a flat, sandy plain. Only a few church towers suggest to the foreigner the location of Manila. So Jacob's perspective of Manila, I would like to look at it from a traveler's perspective. There's a huge difference if you're living there and you're making an account, like the previous ones from Robler and Robertson. Most of the accounts there were written by the residents or those who were living in Manila for a long time. But the tone or the atmosphere becomes different once a journalist or a visitor or traveler goes to the walled city and writes about it. So the perspective becomes less objective, becomes more critical. So if you notice that he mentioned that the city was built instead on a flat and sandy plain. So he wasn't able to see, perhaps he didn't really travel that much. He didn't go around Intramuros. Maybe it was a short trip, so we can take it with a grain of salt that this was, this is like the modern day travel advisor comment on online, but at the time it was this way. I would also like to mention the novel of Rizal, Noli Me Tangere, that also depicts the walled city, particularly the part where Maria Clara was on top of the roof of a convent, which was actually eventually described as the Santa Clara Convent. And it was, interestingly, it was derived from a news, from a propaganda that was circulating around at the time of a madman, the story of a madman in Intramuros, who was also in the Santa Clara Convent. And then, of course, Rizal took interest in it, and eventually he turned it into a story. So that's how fiction works. Usually, when you write, you get to know something, a news source, or maybe an actual experience or a situation, and you turn it into fiction, and somehow you still present the truth. I would also like to mention Luciano P.R. Santiago's article on the monastery of Santa Clara in the 19th century, because it's collected with the Madnon episode. There were a number of stories about the Santa Clara convent, especially those who are in confinement because of their commitment as a nun, So a lot of consequences, a lot of problems occur when you're in the convent. So Luciano Pierre Santiago was able to do an extensive research, and if you have the means to do further research, you get to understand more how eventually it became mainstream, or the public turns it into a rumor and become fiction. It's interesting how the transition is like that. So now we go to American period. During this period, there was a huge change in terms of how Intramuros is depicted in literature, because this time there are more fiction rather than accounts or stories or articles translated from Spanish to English. So it's direct translation, and we get to see more articles done by travelers. First one that I was able to look into is by Mary Fee, Woman's Impressions of the Philippines. So we get to see different perspectives here of travelers in Intramuros. And this is what she said. We swept up the Pasig River with Fort Santiago and the ancient city wall on the right. We returned to the Escuela Municipal, and most probably she is referring to Ateneo, and after a nap, dressed and went out for a walk. The narrow streets with overhanging second stories, the open windows with gaily dressed girls, leaning out to talk with amorous swains on the pavement below, the swarming vehicles with coachmen shouting tabe, and the frailes, tall, thin, bearded, in brown garments and sandals, or rosy, clean-shaven, plump frailes in flapping white robes, all made a novel scene to our untraveled eyes. In this paragraph alone, the author admits that she is a traveler, and everything is novel to her. So this is like a first a fresh perspective on the walled city. So everything's new to her. In the paragraph, we get to see the beauty of Intramuros from the eyes of a traveler, compared to the other one, the Dutch traveler who saw it in a different light. Another interesting book that I found was An American Doctor's Odyssey by Victor Heiser. This time it's from a medical perspective, also a travelogue. In chapter 1, he entitled it The Little Brown Brother, which is a bit controversial at the time, even up to now. A huge moat stretched around the Intramuros, the old walled city, holding it phaeton-like in indolent grip. The old Spanish houses which lined the narrow streets of the Intramuros leaned lovingly toward each other. These heavy masses of stone, weathered and gray for centuries, had withstood the triple threat of fire, earthquake, and invasion. In the succeeding chapters, he also described the moat, how unhealthy it was, how unhygienic it was. So there was also that different perspective when it comes to the hygiene or to the health issues concerning the walled city. I would also like to mention the travel accounts of a Dutch in colonial Manila, 1909-1912. So this is already an American period. Let me read it to you because I find it very interesting. In the afternoon, I take an interesting stroll through the Puerta Santa Lucia. When the dust has already set, I walk past the Anda Monument and Fort Santiago and return home through the demolished Postigo Gate. From this alone, we're not sure of the accuracy of the account because Postigo was not demolished. Maybe he was referring to the gaps of the walls that were demolished during the American period. Although it is drizzling, I take a stroll, first to Fort Santiago, where I enjoyed the dashing Velasquez figure on top of the southern entrance again, and where I find the inscription of 731 on the inner gate. Seeing the miserable emptiness of the Malecon, I'm totally convinced that I would never like to live in Manila because of the barrenness, dustiness, and stuffiness of the city and its environs. So this is another a bit different view of Manila compared to Mary Fee's account. So there are different views, of course, to each his own. So if you notice, the Dutch were more curt and more in your face when they view Intramuros compared to some of the accounts of the Americans. Another popular book that came out during the American period is the one by Percy Hill, Romance and Adventure in Old Manila. It had a very extensive stories, different narratives in fiction. So this is no longer a travelogue, but more of a story about the walled city. And so far, this is the only short story collection, or I would say fiction, that I found during the American period. So if you notice, from until chapter 22, there are different stories about the walled city. So this is one of them. From the introduction alone, you get to see how Percy describes the walled city. We went in by the Calle General Luna, for which a gate has been torn away, breaching the walls, widened and the moat filled. We observed that the sections of the walls were set at such precise angles that cannon fire from them, together with fire from the ramparts of the bastion at the left, could defend the gate from attack from every direction possible to an offensive force. And so it was with all several gates into the city, save, of course, the little Postigo gates on the wee street of Name, which was merely the private entrance for the royal governor and the archbishop. Okay, so it's more still like a travelogue for me, especially this one, the enlargement of Gorgonio, the Plaza de Armas in Old Manila sizzle in the afternoon sun. Official Dome was enjoying its siesta. The few guards on duty at the Ayuntamiento hog and the shady corners and alcoves. No one else, not even a cassock friar or black-robed Jesuits, knew anywhere. Manila slumbered through the burning heat. The Spanish inhabitants had lived long enough in the tropics to know how to make them, which is precisely the way in which the natives take them. So an hour or two went by, the sun sloped down the heavens, and at last the plaza was cooling in the shade of the lofty palace faced by the Don Esteban Venegas along its western limit. So on the first paragraph alone, we see that the writer is evoking an atmosphere of still the Spanish era, but at the same time there was a very detailed, particularly on Don Esteban Venegas, on the character, on the detail of the character alone. And now we go to Nick Joaquin. If there's any Filipino writer in English that we can say who loved Manila, it would be Nick Joaquin, because most of his works, literary works, novels, essays, plays, were about Intramuros, and that's how we love Intramuros. There was even an account that even if he left for the province during the war, and when he returned to Intramuros, he was sobbing and crying when he discovered and saw that Intramuros was reduced to rubbles, or was destroyed during the Second World War. If you want to start with Nick Joaquin and discover his literature about Manila, it would be best to read Manila, My Manila. This was published in 1988 through a project of a mayor. I believe it was Mayor Lopez at the time, who asked Nick Joaquin to write a story about Manila, and of course he obliged. It started with how it was built. And eventually, it's actually I have a book here, Manila, My Manila, this one. The chapter started in building a site all the way to the freedom of the city. So it's about 5 chapters long, about 400 pages of the story of Manila. So it's a very intensive, very detailed story and narrative of the walled city. So let's read the chapter 1. This is only the first paragraph. Manila took a long time to make. What is now its ground used to be the sea. The sea reached as far as the present towns of Mandaluyong, a place of waves, and Makati, a place of tides. All the land north of this, up to what's now Quezon City, was foreshore, and all the land south was underwater. Then through hundreds and hundreds of years, this water began to fill up until the triangle of ground disappeared. So nagsimula si Nick Joaquin on how it was built eventually, and how it was how the settlement of Raso Layman started, and when the Spaniards occupied Manila, etc. So he started with the origin of Manila. Would also like to mention the book Intramuros. It's here. It was published by Philippine Daily Inquirer also in 1988, about the same time that Manila was published. And this time, it's Nick Joaquin wrote about the walled city in essay form. But this particular essay, sa loob ng Maynila, is not just an essay. It's an ode to Manila. I feel that sa loob ng Maynila is his best work about Intramuros. Of course, they're the plays supported from the artists, but if you want to discover Manila, Intramuros, in every detail, in the smallest detail, you have to read sa loob ng Maynila, which is also part of the essay collection of Nick Joaquin, Intramuros. So let's read some parts of it. What I did was I just chose some of the short ones, because I think this is about 20 pages long, so we don't have that much time, so we have to compress it. Okay, so there are places that you feel, okay, sorry. Okay, we're having some, okay. Okay. There are places you feel you were born knowing, because however far back you throw memory, they already are familiar. With Intramuros, the problem is to distinguish the 3 layers of memory that emotionally conjure up for me 3 different places. There's the Intramuros remembered from childhood, the Intramuros seen again and with a colder eye in early adolescence after a provincial exile, and the Intramuros rediscovered just in time before it vanished forever. Intramuros does for me a place within a place, as in those Chinese boxes always have another box inside another. And I see how aptly the oldest referred to it as sa loob ng Maynila. Was Papa up early pouring through his law códigos? He had a court meeting sa loob ng Maynila. Was the streetcar full of girls in uniform dragging bag of books? They were on their way to the Colegio de Santa Catalina, or Santa Rosa, or Santa Isabel sa loob ng Maynila. Were the boys stepping out in the evening in gala black suits and boots? There was a festive velada sa loob ng Manila. Was the October dawn lively with those families trooping out before daylight? They were trying to escape the holiday crowds by hearing mass early at Santo Domingo sa loob ng Maynila. And from childhood, no amount of familiarity could dull me for the mysterious wondrousness of Intramuros as the very vitals, the head heart, the secret soul of my city. So get to see here get to read here how Nick really loved Manila. Every going into it was a penetration, and in there for a Manileño, it was always like coming home. He was back to his original, essential, eternal island. Even where there was the effect, as you roared, you beat a palm against your mouth, the echoes that seemed to be chanting a spell or a spiel. Beyond the tunnel was Calle Real, running between the hospital San Juan de Dios, the inside of which we saw only on Monday, Thursdays, Visita Iglesia, and a monastery, San Agustin, at whose gates crouch the stone lions we supposed to be the brothers of the lions on Arroceros, crouching in front of the barrack there. However, there was one corner of Intramuros that struck me, even in childhood, as looking different from the rest of it. Entering Victoria Gate, you skirted around the Old Manila High School with its great shady trees and came to where Calle Solana started. At the mouth of Solana was a row of low, squarish, whitewashed stone buildings, with the wall almost blank, save for a window high up there or balcony with wooden rajas adjutting care. Years later, I would see such houses in villages all over Spain, not merely in Andalusia, and would be reminded of that short block of box-like houses at the mouth of Calle Solana, the only corner of Intramuros that could be said to look like a bit of Spain. So, in Filipino, I would say hitik na hitik, kumbaga yung description ni Nick Joaquin of Intramuros, because he knows it very much. There were stories of Nick Joaquin strolling around Manila in the afternoons, just walking around, enjoying the sights. Going around, I think from Paco, he would walk to Taft and then to Ermita, Malate Ermita, then to Intramuros. Another noteworthy book of Nick Joaquin is The Prose and Poems. This was published with Bookmark, and I believe was also published by different publications in some years ago. This one would describe the traditions and the culture of Intramuros through its religious activities. The short story of the Mass of Saint Silvestre. It's about New Year's Day tradition. So let me read it. Manila has been a cathedral city almost from its foundation. For centuries, it was one of the only two cities in the Orient to whose gates the New Year's key bearer made his annual visitation. For this purpose, Saint Silvestre always used the Puerta Postigo, which is of the 7 gates of our city, the one reserved for the private use of the viceroys and the archbishops. There he is met by the great Saint Andrew, Episcopal Patron of Manila, accompanied by Santa Potenciana, who is our minor patroness, and by Saint Francis and Saint Dominic, the guardians of our walls. So with this description, if you're Intramuros, you somehow map where Postigo Gate is and how near it is the cathedral. So very accurate depiction of Intramuros because, of course, of his love and familiarity of the place. And there's May Day Eve and other stories also by Nick Joaquin. We won't read this, but I would like you to, maybe if you have time for those students and teachers to read this very, very unique way of writing. Wala siyang period at all. It's one whole page of sentence, of a paragraph, sorry. Tuloy-tuloy siya. There were commas, of course, but it's a very unique technique, actually. It's very Nick Joaquin, actually, and he even creates his own words, his own language, because of course he's already a master of the English language, so he knows how to handle it, to play around the language. So there. The May Day Eve, well, it's actually an interesting story of a woman who would like to discover who will be his partner by holding a candle in front of a mirror before the strike of midnight on May 1. Okay, and it was, the setting is in Intramuros. If you read the first paragraph of the description of the area of an old ancestral house with cobblestones, among other things. Of course, the Nick Joaquin canon will not be complete without a portrait of artist as Filipino, a play written by Nick Joaquin after the war. It's his ode for the walled city. I think this is his most heartbreaking work, for the reason that he wrote it after the war when Intramuros was destroyed. So the story is actually about Intramuros. While there were characters of Candida and Paula Marasigan who were living in an old house with their ailing father, a former painter, who were struggling in life because of financial burdens. The constant blackouts. This was the start of the war. I believe this was December. It was set in 1941. So there was that feeling of dread of what's going to happen to their lives. There was a number. There's so many layers of stories. And perhaps this is the masterpiece of Nick Joaquin on how he was able to depict various concerns or themes at the time, especially about the decline of Intramuros, the eventual death of Intramuros, the loss of Intramuros. Let me show you some of the photographs. This was the play was eventually turned into a film by Lamberto Avellana. And the setting, of course, is in an old house and I believe at the corner of Calle Real. So let me read some parts of it for us to understand what Nick Joaquin would like to tell us. So the character of Bitoy is a journalist. Intramuros, the old Manila, the original Manila, the noble and ever loyal city. To the early conquistadores, she was a new Tyre and Sidon. To the early missionaries, she was a new Rome. Within these walls was gathered the wealth of the Orient, silk from China, spices from Java, gold and ivory and precious stones from India. And within these walls, the champions of Christ assembled to conquer the Orient of the Cross. Through these old streets, once crowded a marvelous multitude of viceroys and archbishops, mystics and merchants, pagan sorcerers and Christian martyrs, nuns and harlots, and elegant marquisas, English pirates, Chinese mandarins, Portuguese traders, Dutch spies, Moro sultans, and Yankee clipper captains. For 3 centuries, this medieval town was a Babylon in commerce and a New Jerusalem in its faith. Now look, all that's left now. Weed rubble and scrap iron, a piece of wall, a fragment of stairway, and over there, the smashed Gothic facade of old Santo Domingo. Desolate, sorry, I cannot see it. Como desolata es Civitas Dei. So in this paragraph alone at the start of the play, there's already the introduction of how Intramuros eventually perished. So we already have an idea of what's going to happen in the play. We see the desperation, the absurdity of the situation to them, despite laughing over some small event that happened at that time. They were crying at the same time. And at the end, of course, I'm not gonna ruin it for those who still haven't read or watched the film or the play, but it shows us a very important message of how important Intramuros is for the Filipino people. After all, the portrait is about Intramuros and the people living in it. The characters depicted, the Candida and Paula, who didn't want to leave Intramuros. The father, reflecting or symbolizing ideals. You see, they're hugging him, and the eyes of the actors in desperation, in fear of what's going to happen. Perhaps it will be the last time that they're going to watch the La Naval procession from their window. So it's a very sad story of Intramuros, and gives us an important message of how we should take care of of Intramuros, because it's not just about Manila, but it's also about the history of our country. While portrait was shown in film and in play, the first one I believe was staged in Aurora Gardens in Intramuros in 1955. Through the years, there were different versions of the play done by the Philippine Educational Theater Association, and star with the actors. This one I believe is Lolita Rodriguez, Rita Gomez, Dante Rivero of Larawan. So this is the version. There's also a version done in the Suleiman Theater, also by Lolita Rodriguez. But another one was a different actor, Charito Solis and Philip Salvador, but Lolita Rodriguez, I believe, is still part of the play. So you get to see Nick Joaquin here in the photograph as well. And this is the Sulaiman Theater, the venue of PETA. So this is how they watched the play before. They would put a lot of chairs on both sides. It's very raw. It's very. I can imagine how the audience enjoyed watching Larawan in La Suleiman Theater at the time. And if you're familiar with the musical, Ang Larawan, this was shown a few years ago. It starred Rachel Alejandro. There's also Paula Avellino and Joanna Angkil. This is directed by Lori Arsenas. It's in Filipino. A lot of people would say it's more relatable because it's being sung, and at the same time it's in our language. So mas madali siyang kumbaga mas realistic. But of course that's debatable. But at any rate, this is still a good film. Maganda sa film na to is because they shot most of the scenes or some of the scenes in Intramuros. Even if they can shoot it in other places, I believe they want to evoke the aura of the place. Kasi iba pa rin if you do it in Intramuros, you feel the feel of the place. So mas realistic yung feeling and more authentic. So I hope you will be able to watch this this movie or this musical. So so far, we discussed the American period, the Spanish period. You already see how the landscape changes from Spanish. That was a bit different because of it was the first 300 years. And then the American period, less than 40 years. A lot of things already happened. The war, the transition from Spanish to American, the perspective from a traveler's point of view, the stories of Nick Joaquin. We see the decline as well of Manila through the short stories or the literature that we've read so far. In this part, the wartime Manila, there were very few materials for this one, for the reason that it was very challenging for the writers for many reasons, to write about Intramuros. First, mahirap for them dahil they're too close to the situation, to the war. We cannot write something that's still happening. I mean, in fiction, it will be very challenging. At the same time, some of the writers were writing different themes. So it wasn't really about Intramuros. But I found one story in the collection of UP Press, the short stories from 1941 to 1955. So this is still available, edited by Leopoldo Yaves. The title is All Over the World by Vicente Rivera. Vicente Rivera is a writer from Albay, and he wrote about Intramuros in 1941, but he wrote this in 1948. There was an analysis that the stories about Intramuros, about the war, were good, were the best ones written after 1945. So I hope you get what I mean when I said that if you write during the war, masyadong malapit sa situation of what's happening. So mas maganda if you write it kapag malayo ka na dun sa material mo. So let's read some parts of it. Sorry if I keep stopping because it's very difficult to to move the cursor with some of the popping images. Anyway, one evening in August 1941, I came out of a late movie to a silent cold night. I shivered a little as I stood for a moment in the narrow street. Looking up at the distant sky alive with stars, I stood there letting the night wind sip through me and listening. The street was empty, the houses on the street dim, with a kind of ghostly dimness that seems to embrace sleeping houses. I had always liked empty streets. In the night, I had always stopped for a while in the streets, listening for something I did not quite know what. Perhaps for low, soft price that empty streets and sleeping houses seem to share in the night. We walked down the shadowed street, Magallanes Street in Intramuros. Like all other streets there, was not wide enough, hemmed in by old, mostly unpainted houses, clumsy and unlovely, even in darkening light of the fading day. August 1941 was a warm month. Hangover of summer still permeated the air, especially in Intramuros. But like of the days of late summer, there were afternoons when the weather was soft and clear, sky a watery green, with a shell-like quality to it that almost made you see through and beyond, so that watching it made you lightheaded. Intramuros, in Intramuros, the people left their homes the first night of the war. Many of them slept in the niche of the old walls the first time they heard the siren scream in earnest. That evening, I returned home to find the apartment house empty. The janitor was there, my cousin worked in the army was there, but the rest of the tenants were gone. So we see a desolate, empty Intramuros in this short story of Vicente. So we see now the sudden decline of Intramuros in the late 40s, especially during the war in this story, as it gave us descriptions of empty streets, particularly of Magallanes streets, Magallanes Street, narrow street, unpainted houses, clumsy and unlovely. So that's how we see the transition of Intramuros from its golden age in the American period to wartime. So we now go to post-war Manila. This time, we have to give credit to the writers who were brave enough to write about the walled city after the war, particularly how they depicted, honestly, the walled city and its utter decline and decay. We start with Estrella Alfon. Estrella Alfon wrote a fairy tale for the city set in Quiapo. I'm including it here because she's a master of one of the best writers, Filipino writers in English that describes the city in a very detailed way. I like how she is able to evoke emotions through the descriptions of the area of the city, of the suburb of Quiapo. By the way, this short story of a fairy tale for the city became quite controversial. She was, I think this went to court for pornography at the time in the 1950s. I'm not sure if you're able to get hold of a copy of this, but let me know if you're interested. I was able to get hold of a copy of this despite Estrella Alfon decided not to publish it anymore. Anyway, let's go to one of his short stories entitled Low Wall. We'll just make it very quick. I'm not sure if we still have enough time. We had built our barong-barong need days immediately after the liberation. It had not mattered to us then, as it had not to so many others by the far left bereft what the barong-barong would be like. Enough to us that this would be a roof over our heads and walls to hide the wretched bareness of lives, pulled down to the most essentials by the liberation's conflagration. Okay, I'll just move it a bit faster. It had quickly come out, however, after a while, when other houses sprang up beside ours, some of them meaner, some of them better than our own shack. Then the shelter we now call home was in some ways inadequate and wanting. We had pulled the charred wood from the ashes, their surface embers. We had quickly hacked off to save the unburned core of wood underneath, and had made this serve for posts. They twisted into the black and galvanized iron sheets. These two we had salvaged, and of these fashioned roofs and walls. When the rain came, the water leaked in through the roof, and wind drove the rain in through the flimsy nail-holed back walls. A storm would rattle the whole structure, shake it like a truck full of empty cans. And when the dust aroused from the seared upheaved streets, dust settled on food and beds and clothing inadequately protected by low, jerry-built walls. So Alphon depicted accurately the proliferation of the informal settlers in the walled city at that time. So for the understanding of everyone, after the war, most of the victims of the war had no place to live, especially those from different places. So they gathered in Intramuros, eventually built their makeshift houses. So in this photo, and in the short story of Esther Alphon, she was able to perfectly depict what was happening in the 50s, even up to late 70s at that time. So there. And of course, Intramuros was also depicted not just in short stories, but also in films. The story of The Walls of Hell, it's an American film, but there's, I believe, Fernando Po is also part of the cast. It also has a different title, Intramuros. So in this, so by now you get to see a shift in the narrative of Intramuros. To post-war, we see the desolate, the informal settlers. The title alone, The Walls of Hell. So it's a different atmosphere now for the walled city. Another film that I would like to mention, also the screenplay of and also directed by Lamberto Villana, is Anakdalita. The setting is in the ruins of Recollet Church in Intramuros, which is now located in the present location of Manila Bulletin. So the character of Rosa Rosali here is a prostitute. And we from the character alone, we get to have an idea that it's about desperation, hopelessness within the walled city. So you get to see here the background. They used the Recollet Church as backdrop for the setting, where Rosa Rizal and his family live as well. From the pictures alone, you get an idea that what the story is about. This is available online, by the way, and YouTube. So if you're interested, even the Walls of Hell is also available on YouTube. So if you would like to watch it, please do to have an idea of the milieu or the background of Intramuros at that time. So now we're almost at the tail end of the discussion of the lecture. We now go to the present day Manila. The short stories or the essays written about Manila to present. We have Pedro Dandan. This time Tagalog naman yung sinulat niya about Intramuros. In one of his collections, May Buhay sa Looban at 20 kwento. So this was also published by UP Press. The title of the short story is May Kalmen at Batong Buhay, Isang Estero. So let me read it to you. Walamput siyam na siya, buhat sa Intramuros hanggang Tondo, napilit siyang umasa sa mga kapalayagayang squatter sa Intramuros. Hanggang sa ligaligin siya, sila ng mga makinang panggiba at saklawi ng mga proyekto ng syudad, ang kanilang mga tirahan at itaboy sila ng walang pakundangan. Pinapapangit daw nila ang mariking Manila at kahiya-hiya sila sa mga dayuhang puti. So dito pa lang may idea ka na na the character ay isang informal settler. So even if post-war to present day, nandun pa rin yung mixed na themes of the depiction of Intramuros, of the social realism that we see now. Okay, so next slide. Another collection that I found is Manila Noir. My apologies. Okay, so it's one of the short stories here is kumbaga nagkaroon din ng shift bigla of the depiction kasi this is a crime story set in Intramuros. This short story entitled A Human Right by Rosario Cruz Lucero described Intramuros in a different light. So there were some discussion about tunnels, so let me read some parts of it. Beneath the Intramuros of contrived nostalgia and simulated refinement was a maze of underground tunnels that neither guidebook, tour guide, nor map hinted at. The night guards at every building Elias Isabel went to were his friends. They all spoke Bisaya, the language of Davao, and they were very pleased to know that Isabel spoke their language too. They let the two wander around on their own. Elias took Isabel first to a boys' school that had once been a convent. The guard on duty insisted on lending them his flashlight when Elias told him he wanted to show his friend the tunnel. As Elias and Isabel walked through it, they could hear the muffled sound of tricycles mixing with that of horses' hooves and kalesa wheels grating against the pavement above. They came out of the tunnel into a basement of a bank that had once been a monastery. A friendly guard greeted Elias there too, calling him sir. In a corner of the ruins, he cleared away loose rubble soil, rocks, bricks, over a square slab of stone before lifting it, and a neat circular hole revealed itself. They went down the stone steps that led to a cavernous passage. It was 2 kaleses wide, 2 men high, and lined with red adobe bricks. They had gone in only a few steps when Elias pointed to a pair of skeletons lying prone on a ledge. They were the remains of not very grown people. Maybe this was the way of our Spanish masters got rid of their vermin too. They walked 5 meters to fork in the passageway. If we go left, we go to another former convent. If we go right, we end up at the other cathedral, the other one that survived the war. Which one do you want to take? So this is, of course, fiction. While there were some quote-unquote tunnels discovered in Intramuros, these are unexplored tunnels. So we're not sure if these are really passageways that connects another building to from one building to another. So at any rate, this is an interesting addition to give Intramuros that awe of mystery and part of the crime film noir atmosphere of Intramuros. In most recent novels that I discovered or read so far, Randy Ribai's Patron Saints of Nothing also had a description of the walled city, but in a different light. So yung mga contemporary writers ngayon would depict Intramuros differently. So iba-ibang themes. They won't just discuss or focus on one theme compared to American period or post-war. But this time, it's from a traveler's perspective. At dinner, Tito Maning interrogates everyone about their day, like he did last night. When it's Grace's turn, she makes up an elaborate fiction about our day walking around Rizal Park and in Intramuros, the wall section of Manila, that hails back to the Spanish colonial days. She recounts everything in impressive detail, even in throwing in a story about paying a worker to allow us into some of the areas of Fort Santiago where Jose Rizal was executed that are usually off limits to the public. Okay? So, but, you know, I'm not sure if the writer is familiar with the detail. Of course, it's allowed. Some areas of Intramuros are not that restricted to the public. So of course, there's that creative license to some of the writers. So not just in novels or short stories, but also in movies and screenplays. Recently, Star Cinema would use Intramuros as a setting for fantasies. So, doon naman tayo ngayon sa mga fantasy stories. Because I think the character here of Tony Gonzaga is someone who's already dead. Okay, so I think Piolo is talking to a dead person here in the film. So the title is Last Night, and the setting is in Plaza San Luis in Intramuros. Another teleserye this time, entitled Lost Recipe by GMA7, used the walled city as a backdrop again for a fantasy story. So now you get to see the different themes of the walled city. Okay, so before I end my discussion on the literary landscape of the walled city, I would like to recommend some of the books for you to have an idea as an additional reference to understand the narrative of the walled city. We have the Nick Joaquin Portraits of the Artist. We see here the side of Nick Joaquin as a person and how he loved Intramuros through his short stories, novels, and plays. We also have Almanac for Manileños, also by Nick Joaquin. So I'm sure you're familiar with an almanac. So you get to see the date, the event that took place. There's a short narrative about that particular day, and most of them are about Manila, about Intramuros. I would also like to mention Carmen Guerrero Nakpil's essays about history of Intramuros. Her essays are very easy to read. The fine handling of the English language, very easy to read. You get to enjoy history in a different light. So if you're the type of person who gets bored reading papers or historical books, I recommend Carmen Guerrero Nakpil for you to read as a start to appreciate history or Philippine history. This one is an exception. This is not really fiction, but it's more of an account of those survivors of the war by Sword and Fire by Alfonso Alvit. So there were accounts of the survivors and victims of the Second World War, the liberation of Manila, particularly those who were in Intramuros at the time. A while ago, I mentioned about the St. Clair, the Santa Clara. Luciano Pierre Santiago's To Love and Suffer will give us an idea of the life of the Clare, the poor Clares in Intramuros at the time. Very well researched, and it's highly recommended. So there, I would like to thank everyone for listening. I'm not sure if I went beyond the limit. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Jet, for that very interesting presentation. Intramuros is one of the most studied locales in the Philippines. And interestingly, we still have a lot to know about the walled city. And Intramuros is a loose canon, no? With diverse themes, tropes, and cliches over the centuries in both fiction and non-fiction. As such, I am sure that we all have learned a lot in your presentation. Thank you, Jeffrey. And now, let us now proceed with our open forum. So everyone is free to raise their questions. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to type your comment or question in the Q&A button below so that we can discuss them here in this open forum. Okay, let us see if we have any questions from our audience. Now, I have a question for you. Now, non-fiction sources are very important in how writers form their works of fiction, yes?
Yes, that's right.
Right. Let's look at it in reverse. How important is fiction in our understanding of real history, especially in the case
Well,
of Intramuros?
mhm. Well, every vision of a writer is to present the truth, even in fiction. So that's how it is. The creative side of fiction would depict a place, evoke a place or a situation or an event uh, in such a way that people would understand it more in a different light. But the intention is still the same, to present facts and the truth, and to send a certain message to the readers. So yun yung kanyang mission.
Thank you for that. We have a question from Celia Sandeas. Now, she's asking where we can find the books on Nick Joaquin, like the words of Nick Joaquin. Where can we, if they're available, where we can buy them? Do you have an idea?
Yes. Some are available on Bookmark online. So I think you can check on Facebook, Bookmark, and also Anvil. Anvil Publishing has, I believe, a number of Nick Joaquin books in collection. The plays, I believe, are still published by Bookmark. So those two publishers are online, so it can easily be accessed.
Yeah. We have an interesting question here from anonymous attendee. Do you have any information on how Intramuros is depicted in children's books?
Mm-hmm. Nick Joaquin wrote, sorry, I don't have it. I think it's Candido's Apocalypse, the title, of children's book. Yes, it is, by Nick Joaquin. But it's not really Manila setting, so, or Intramuros setting, but some parts of it lang. Very rare ang depiction of Manila in children's books. It's mostly history, historical novels, or adult fiction, young adult. The list I can find is the young adult by the Patron Saints of Nothing.
Earlier you showed how Intramuros was depicted after the war, no? Especially as shown in the poster of Walls of Hell. Now, in that alone, you can see that Intramuros was depicted as a place of desolation and suffering. Now, this is in contrast with how Intramuros is depicted right now, which is seen, Intramuros right now is more appreciated in a more nostalgic and romantic manner. Now, at one point, did you think this change came about, and what brought about this change?
A lot of factors can be considered here. One would be the some people would operate on nostalgia, the appreciation of the past, of the history. Some are political. Because of technology, we get to see different perspectives already and different themes. There's already that effect of media to the writers. So we're not just confined in one theme, especially now that we can see Intramuros in different perspectives. So parang at the end, the tail end of Intramuros, the present day Intramuros, would have all the themes from the Spanish to the present day. So those are one of the factors, I believe.
Could it be that this shift was brought about by as a reflection of the restoration of the physical fabric that is happening in Intramuros, especially up in the 80s and the 90s?
Yes. Malaking factor din yun, yung changes, the physical changes of the landscape, particularly on the reconstruction and restoration. Nagkakaroon ng different stories and imagined or non-imagined ang Intramuros, particularly on the themes of history. maybe on about the illegal settlers, informal settlers, sorry. So yung kanina yun when I mentioned the stories of Estelle Alfon, of Pedro Dandan, vis-a-vis the fantasies, and of course the stories of the film noir, the crime fiction of Rosario Rosero. So nag-iiba-iba siya, halo-halo na siya.
Thank you for that. We have a question from Samantha Lucas. What can you say about the depiction of Intramuros in the book series I Love You Since 1892?
Book series. Sorry, I'm not familiar with it. That's one thing I think I wasn't able to do research on. So it would be nice if we gather most of the stories that you found in Intramuros. Let me know so we can do a critique on every creative work produced.
We have a question from Eureka Sugimoto. Good afternoon, sir. I have a question po. Aside from the Little Brown Brother you've discussed, you've discussed having this controversial side, what are the other controversial literary works concomitant to Intramuros? Sorry, am I reading your question right? What other controversial literary works? Yeah, I think he's asking for what other controversial literary works are related to Intramuros.
The Mad Nun episode that I mentioned a while ago, I just didn't dwell on it, or it didn't expound on it kasi it's very sensitive, particularly as it describes the clergy of the religious orders. So that one, yon, isa yon. Another controversial would be actually I intentionally skipped some of the paragraphs of the short stories that I presented, but some of the stories that I already shown are very controversial. Even the A Human Right by Rosario Rosero, that's a bit controversial. The Low Wall of Estelle Alfon is also controversial. If you want controversial stories, go look for A Fairy Tale for the City of Estelle Alfon, because she almost got imprisoned because of that short story. So yun, that was set in the 1950s. Right now, wala masyado present day if you're looking for a short story that's controversial. The story of Doña yung sa tag dito yung Spanish period that I mentioned, yung sa Plaza Sampalucan. The house, it's also very controversial, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's the reason why it's called Sampalucan, no?
Yes.
Because of the bitterness.
Yeah, but they just added it, but I'm not sure if it's true. Kasi parang they just demolished the house and that's it, according to the accounts. Hanggang dun lang yung narrative.
Yeah.
And then they mentioned that sampalok trees grew, na it was a sour story, somehow relatable. So yeah, maybe it could be, but yeah. We try to avoid to add those, pero yeah, it's an added flavor to the story.
How would you describe how Rizal depicted Intramuros in his novels? I mean, as a place.
For that's if you're looking for controversial yun, because of how she depicted Maria Clara walking at the top of the roof of Santa Clara Convent. There was no mention of a convent, I believe. Diba? Hindi naman talaga. It was not explicitly mentioned, but it was derived from a propaganda against the church at that time. So the depiction was always like that, particularly of Intramuros. There were mentions of areas, just like any other travel stories that I mentioned or I read. Pero Rizal was more political when it comes to his depiction of the walled city. So he wasn't merely describing the place or depicting the place, but he was depicting the character of the walled city itself, run by the clergy or the church. So how powerful the church was. So it was about power. So yun, ganun yung theme niya.
Uh, Aside from merely being a recurring theme in both fiction and non-fiction, because Intramuros was always a recurring theme in the literary landscape, how do you think was Intramuros able to contribute toward the Philippines' literary and intellectual culture, aside from being merely just recurring in the stories?
Intramuros is not just a setting for these writers, especially Nick Joaquin. Siguro let's just zero in on Nick Joaquin since he has the most number of stories and materials written about the walled city. The intention of Nick Joaquin, although debatable, is about to engage the public about the relevance of the walled city and of the Intramuros. So it's about appreciation for history, ang kanyang goal dun sa kanyang mga works. So maybe we can look at it that way. Appreciation of heritage of history, because he wasn't just writing about. It wasn't just about fiction that he wrote. He also wrote articles about Intramuros, plays about Intramuros. So in various forms, the walled city was shown in different light for different audiences. So that alone gives us an idea that Nick Joaquin's intention is to educate the public about the walled city. What can I add pa ba? Yun so far kasi I think it's important that we focus on one writer. Although if you take a look at ano ba yung project of every writer for every short story, yung post-war, one of the short stories, it was about the desolation, about the empty Intramuros. So what is it about? Ano yung intention ng writer doon? Why did he write it? Writers wouldn't just write a story for the sake of writing it. There's always something to say about it. Some writers doesn't want to hear message, yung parang moral lesson. Of course, hindi siya ganon. But it's really what you want to say about Intramuros. And I think stories are a powerful tool in sending a message to the public, especially post-war when Intramuros was still being rebuilt, or I would say neglected for several decades. Since it was neglected, you get to see a canon of works about desperation, about informal settlers. So parang almost 3 decades of short stories na puro ganun lang yung themes. But now, post-war, present day, different themes na siya because of the reconstruction, of the changes of the landscape. So in every changes that's happening in real life and the reality of Intramuros, the writers themselves will take the responsibility of informing the general public of what's really happening to Intramuros through fiction or through essays or plays. So mas madali for them to relate, to understand in a different form through art. So yung short stories, yung ganyan, plays and movies, etc. So you get to be more connected to Intramuros in that sense.
Let's go to Nick Joaquin. That's for very good Nick Joaquin. Now, we have a question from Jason Vega. Do the way we look and perceive Intramuros now, do you think, heavily affected by the writings and stories of Nick Joaquin on Intramuros? Jason said that I read from a certain historian that living in Intramuros during the time wasn't pleasant. The sewer system was horrible daw.
Yes. Yan yung medyo controversial na question. To each his own depiction of the setting of Intramuros. Yung project kasi of Nick Joaquin is different for Intramuros. Parang may personal project kasi si Nick Joaquin when it comes to the walled city. And if he succeed or not, hindi na siya usually problem of the writer, but the responsibility of the reader to understand what the project is about, particularly of Nick Joaquin. I cannot admit na nag-fail si Nick Joaquin because even up to now, ginagamit yung materials niya for even the larawan was just, diba? 3 years ago, 4 years ago, yung movie, the musical of Nick Joaquin is still there. And may mga, even his books are being republished by Anvil. So I think it's how you get access to the stories is also could be a challenge. Yung literary canon kasi of Intramuros, I think this is the first time that we were able to collect it. Even this ILS, parang first time din nagkaroon ng discussion about Intramuros as through literature. Kasi in the Manila Studies Conference, it's always about papers, history, Blair and Robertson, but not really about yung canon itself of the short stories, plays, etc. of Intramuros. So maybe we could do not really encyclopedia, but a collection of all the stories and promote it in such a way that the general public would appreciate and understand, maybe through audiobook or online, accessible, free to all, para mas magkaroon ng understanding appreciation of Intramuros. Kasi nagkakaroon minsan ng disconnect, lalo na if maybe Nick Joaquin was just doing this and then hindi pa rin naman nagre-reflect up to now yung appreciation and understanding of Intramuros. It's no longer the fault of Nick Joaquin, but maybe the fault of the education system or maybe the media and how it was being depicted. So maraming factors to be considered here as well. Kasi the materials are there. It's when I was doing the collection, reading the collection, ang dami talaga. And napakaganda ng mga stories. So why is it that no one's reading all of this? So parang nakakapanghinayang that ang daming magandang stories, ang daming magandang projects about Intramuros through fiction, and they're not being read. So maybe we can take a look at that way na doon nagkakaroon ng problem muna. So I hope I was able to answer the question of there. Kasi medyo complicated yung concern na yan. So we cannot just hold the one writer responsible for Intramuros. Kasi he's an artist after all. So there.
Thank you for that, Jeff. I agree with you. No? Intramuros is indeed a loose canon. No? So many works of fiction, so many movies about Intramuros. We did not even consider the commercials na nag-feature ng Intramuros. Ang dami. So Intramuros is like Santa Claus. No? Everyone is writing about Santa Claus. No? So napakadami. And curiously, I think this is the first time that someone has studied that landscape, no? Intramuros as a loose canon. Yeah, and then about this disconnect, so we have a question from Allen Mayodong. We understand that creative writing belongs to the literary arts. Yun yung first part. Then sabi niya, artistry somehow defeats authenticity. Then how do we reconcile this in order not to create misrepresentations of Intramuros?
If you read fiction, you should always be prepared of the intention of the writer and the artistic license. So whatever the intention is, you take it as it is. So you cannot impose na ay dapat ganito ganyan kasi mali, may ganyan yung hindi accurate ganun, 'di ba? Bakit masyadong mahaba, masyadong maikli? For example, the Mass of Saint Sylvester in Nick Joaquin. When you read the story, parang ang haba-haba ng prosesyon. Parang haba-haba from Postigo to Manila Cathedral. But actually, if you just go to walk there, parang less than 50 meters lang siya. So there lies the problem, di ba? Parang nasan yung accuracy of the story. But what is the intention of the story itself? Look at it that way. Don't look at it in a way na parang because you want to fill the place. Then read an essay, a non-fiction, or a history book. Pero that's the reason why I'm promoting essays. Kasi nandun yung accuracy if you want accuracy. But for Nick Joaquin, you cannot expect that because that's how he writes. Naku, baka may mga kamag-anak ni Nick Joaquin dito. But yeah, that's how he writes. Kasi, di ba, the artistic license. So, there, we cannot delve on Nick Joaquin more. Marami kasing mga criticisms on that. And I'm aware of all of those articles about how Nick Joaquin depicts Manila. And minsan hindi raw, it's totally different daw from the other historical books. But again, let's look at it at what the writer wants to say. Doon na lang tayo tumingin, not really on the accuracy of it. So, ang hirap sagutin ng tanong, to be honest, but I hope you get what I mean, na ganun yung intention of the writer.
Yeah, and I think, if I may add, we have this concept of suspension of disbelief, where we intentionally suspend our disbelief for the purposes of entertainment and enjoyment of a literary piece.
Yeah, look at it that way. Kumbaga, if it's fantasy, if it's film, if it's a crime story, ganun siya, di ba? So that's how it is. So do not expect the accuracy of the tunnels there. Nawala naman talaga ang tunnels. It doesn't really connect to another building. So yun, ganun siya. Let's be more critical of the message or what the story is trying to say to us, rather than look at the intricacy of it. Kasi somehow you just have to enjoy it. You not overanalyze the short stories, because it loses its meaning and its magic pag ganun.
Thank you for that. Okay, so unfortunately we are running out of time for our open forum, but I can accommodate one last question. This is from Amada Ciudad. Sir, sabi niya, if you rank the books, what is the best recommendation for us to read? So, siguro personal lang.
Personal. Go for Nick Joaquin talaga, lalo na yung sa loob ng Maynila. If you want a really wonderful, a really good narrative of Intramuros, it's really Nick Joaquin that you should go for. Of course, accuracy-wise, nandun naman yung accuracy ni Nick Joaquin, but if you want other stories, yung mga accounts of Alwit, yung collection of the during the Second World War, if you want a more realistic, more detailed story during the Second World War, yung mga collection of accounts. And of course, Blair and Robertson, sayang, another nakakapanghinayang na source of information, yung Gutenberg, that's available online for free. So please read the Blair and Robertson because it has a lot of stories about Intramuros.
Right, so that ends our open forum.
Nakamute ka dyan.
Okay na? Okay na ba? Yeah, that ends our open forum for this episode. Now, I'd like to again promote the social media channels of the Intramuros administration. We are available on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And if you came in late today or you completely missed this episode, do not worry because this episode is recorded. A recording will be made available in our YouTube channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And of course, again, I'd like to promote our page at the Google Arts and Culture for those who missed going to our museums. Well, you can visit our Google Arts and Culture as a lot of our museum artifacts have been digitized already. Then, announcement. So this is just an announcement for everybody. So we are going to have a town hall meeting on Monday, September 6th, on the proposed amendments to the rules and regulations of Intramuros. So the topic, of course, is the proposed amendments to our rules inside the district of Intramuros. So when September 6th, 1 to 3 p.m., attendees, stakeholders of Intramuros, but of course, the general public is free to attend. Now, the meeting link is on the screen. And of course, we have also posted the details in our Facebook channel. For more information, feel free to contact me, john.arcilia@intramuros.gov.ph. Sige. Right, so before we end, Jeff, would you like to say some final words?
I would like to thank, of course, IA for giving me the opportunity to conduct this lecture. It was supposed to be last July, but anyway, it was moved. So thank you very much. I just hope that the public would read more books, any kind of literature on Intramuros, so for us to understand and appreciate the history of the wall city in any way it was depicted, in any theme or in any form, whether through movies, films, etc. So that can be a good start for us to start our love for the wall city of Manila and how to save and protect its heritage and our heritage.
Thank you for that, Jeff. And that ends our 66th episode of the Intramuros Learning Sessions. So for updates on our next episode, stay tuned in our Facebook channel, in our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And of course, those who are on Zoom, maybe if you have questions,